First, we invite Philip Smith up, the firstborn son and the former vice president of Alexander and Alexander.
We are deeply touched and grateful to all of you who have come to celebrate the incredible life of our beloved mother, Verna Green Smith. Several years ago, my brother Al wrote about Mother saying, she set an impossible example. To me, this concise, elegant, poignant sentence depicts her so well as a loving and attentive parent, as an extraordinary achiever, as an incredibly effective professional, and one who loved so many people with whom she had contact throughout her life. If she loved you, you knew it and loved her right back. Mom was born in Erskine, Minnesota, to Roy and Sarah Green, and spent most of her childhood in Glasgow, Montana. The youngest of 4 children, she excelled as a student and graduated from high school as valedictorian of her class at the age of 16. There she played an enormous Scots bass drum in the Glasgow Kilties marching band and timpani in the concert band. Watching her march down the field at the gridiron, carrying that enormous drum at a diminutive height of 5'2", while flourishing, twirling, and crisscrossing her sheepskin-covered drumsticks must have been a remarkable sight. And to me, symbolizes the thread which has become her hallmark of her life, excelling by achieving the remarkable. She worked her way through college at the University of Montana, earning a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism at the age of 20, and was named Outstanding Alumnus many years later. After working as a newspaper reporter at the Great Falls Tribune and the Glasgow Courier for a couple of years, she and Dad were married in 1942. During her time with the Glasgow Courier, she earned a pilot's license flying a bi-wing open cockpit Aeronca trainer, wearing a leather pilot's skull cap and goggles. On the day she performed her solo flight, she invited her father to come to the airfield and watch. His response was, "I'm not going to watch you kill yourself." Undaunted, she took off and circled the airfield. After a few rounds of flying the pattern, which is what you do around an airport, you have an oval flight pattern, her instructor began to wave at her with both hands overhead in that sort of a crisscross fashion. Flattered that he was waving to acknowledge she was doing a fine job, she wagged her wings like this in an answering wave, and made successive trips around the field, each time returning her instructor's waves by wagging her wings again, until she suspected that his waves might have meant enough already to land the airplane. Even though her father was afraid for her safety, and her instructor, might have been a little frustrated by her wing wagging, I'm certain that Snoopy, the Red Baron, would have admired her enthusiasm, would have congratulated her for completing her final requirement to earn her pilot's license. Her father did manage to arrive in time to watch her land and give his congratulatory hug. She encouraged Dad to finish college and helped him earn degrees from Iowa State University in physics and mechanical engineering. In 1947, after a short stint back in Glasgow, Mom boarded a train with 3 little boys, and we were aged 4, 2 and a half, and 1. And we joined Dad, who had found work in St. Louis in the Defense Division of Emerson Electric. During our younger childhood, she managed to edit a small weekly tabloid called the Community News, down on Woodson Road. First by working at home, and then later, as we entered school, She became more and more involved in producing the small newspaper. Later, as we boys were about to enter our teenage years, Mother was recruited by the Rittner School District where an emergency need for an English teacher developed at the junior high school level. She was interested in teaching accelerated courses to gifted children and was able to negotiate with her new employer to do so. Thus, she became a bit of a pioneer in that field. She busily set about the ponderous task of developing a new curriculum to support her new assignment while teaching in full course load. To add to her demanding workload, she created an additional position for herself, serving as publicity director for the school district. As if this weren't enough to satisfy her incredible drive, she began working on her master's in education at Washington University by attending night school. All of this while beautifully performing the traditional roles of wife and mother, preparing fully balanced meals every evening for her diabetic husband and 3 ravenous teenagers, doing the laundry and cleaning the house and all the other mundane things, and never missing a beat. She seemed equally as amazing. Frankly, she accomplished all this without this unbelievable workload, never compromising her demeanor. She seemed to just glide through in her sustained, demanding responsibilities without revealing any stressful behavior at all. She attended our Little League baseball games and scouting events, PTA meetings, and she did it with a graceful aplomb as though she had no work burden at all. She finished her master's the same day I graduated from high school, so I treasure an old photograph standing next to her in our graduation robes. During the 60s, she accepted an offer from an educational laboratory named Semerel, later renamed to McRel. This was an organization dedicated to developing new methods of teaching. When she left the Rittner School District, she was replaced with 3 people, ultimately: an English teacher, a publicity director, and an assistant publicity director. One of them was here, I noticed. Concurrently, she earned a PhD in education from St. Louis University. Why not? In addition to her development and public information responsibilities, she was very effective at obtaining funding for Semerel through the U.S. Department of Education, the U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress, and the Rockefeller Foundation, particularly through Senator Mike Mansfield, a former professor of hers at the University of Montana, and what was the fellow's name? John Danforth, another senator, and David Rockefeller Jr. through the Rockefeller Foundation. After she retired, Mother worked as a volunteer for OASIS. It's an acronym, of course, for Older Americans Still in Service. And Marilyn Mann is here today, and she will speak later of her contribution as a colleague. She topped this off by participating as an Olympic torchbearer at the age of 77, as the torch made its way to the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta. Up until about the age of 90, she was still receiving local, regional, state, national awards and accolades for her contributions in education and journalism, notably among them recognition from Stanford University and University of Montana. In the middle of her career, she was presented with a round gold pin by Helen Gurley Brown, managing editor of Ladies' Home Journal. Engraved on his face was the inscription. The inscription read, "Never underestimate the power of a woman." And she wore that pin at professional functions as proudly as a Medal of Honor recipient, and I believe that it served as a meaningful inspiration to her. She loved God and was a longtime member of Stephen Memorial Methodist Church, which was the former name of Harmony Methodist Church. And although I never heard her use a curse word in my mind's eye, I can almost see her standing at the pearly gates as St. Peter is reviewing her book of life, saying, "Wow, that was one hell of a ride." Oops, excuse me, St. Peter. So, thank you.
Alfred Smith is Verna's second-born son and a former business owner. Alfred.
I'd like to thank all of you for coming. I know Mom would have appreciated so much to see all of you here. I know that many of you knew Verna through professional association. Some knew her through the church, as a neighbor, a relative, or a personal friend. In our younger years, my brothers and I knew her only as Mom. We, of course, took her for granted in every way a child can take a parent for granted, such as her love for us and her intense involvement in our lives during our growing years. She always encouraged us to try new things, that we could be anyone we decided to be. To that end, she looked for any budding interest and made the development of that interest available to us. Noodling around on the piano in the basement, piano lessons in a flash. Shuffling and spinning around on the kitchen floor, dance lessons. It wasn't until my teenage years that I began to realize, slowly at first, what an extraordinary woman she was. And as she received first her master's, then her PhD, this realization blossomed quickly, and I watched with amazement as she built a profoundly productive career, piling achievement upon achievement, extending her professional influence, receiving awards and honors for the excellence of her work. And this excellence informed every aspect of her life. After she sold her house, she lived independently for quite a few years at the Brentmore Retirement Community and did quite well there. As we were moving her in, one of the residents, Jean, a retired teacher from the Normandy School District, came up to her and said, "You're Verna Smith, aren't you?" "Well, yes, I am," Mom replied. An intense conversation between those two followed, and a new friendship was instantly born. That was Mom. But several years ago, it became apparent that she would one day need help. So I began rehabbing my son's bedroom for her. No easy task. But by the summer of 2013, it was completely ready to receive her. "Mom," I said, "come out to California and live with me." But she resisted. She did have a stubborn streak, and nobody but nobody was going to tell her what to do. In December 23, she contracted a nearly fatal infection. My daughter Tracy, the next speaker, intervened and forced her to get the medical attention she needed. I gave her a month to recover, then came to St. Louis in January 2014 to take her to live with me and my wife in California. And there she spent the rest of her life, at home with family. Excuse me. In the end, it was my honor and privilege to be able to provide her the loving care that she once provided me. During that year she lived with me, I was able to spend more time with her than at any time since I was a kid living in her house. And I am the richer for it. I love her and miss her terribly. Most nights when she was ready for bed, I'd kiss her on the forehead and say, "Good night, Mom. I'll see you in the morning." And now, one last time, "Good night, Mom. I'll see you in the morning."
Tracy Smith is Verna's firstborn grandchild. She was a transitional caregiver for Verna. She holds a master's in education and is a strings teacher at Rockwood School District.
Thank you all for being here. It's so nice to see so many of you that I haven't seen in a long time. I'd like to talk a little bit about my relationship with my grandmother. As you've heard, she was very, very loving, and I was blessed to have a very close, special relationship with her. She was a loving example of consistency, strength, wisdom my entire life, and we shared a bond. She always made me feel special and loved and important. I remember our visits at the kitchen table on Pineview Court. That's where we would visit, and she would always say, "Tell me all about it," eager to listen. And she always found a way to encourage and support me through all of the stages of my life. I always remember saying, "Think positive," and that's what she did. She was very positive. I think the biggest influence that she had on my life was my music and eventually my career. When I was a little girl, she took me to the movie theater and we saw The Sound of Music with Julie Andrews at the theater. And we both fell in love with it. It was our favorite musical, and it always has been our favorite musical. So, of course, she went and bought the album. And I would go visit Grandma and Grandpa Smith, and I'd sit in the living room in the rocking chair, and they had headphones for the stereo. And I'd listen to the album, and I'd sing with every song, and they put up with that every time I was over there. And I loved it, and I loved that house. The magnolia tree in the front yard, the big porch, the well in the back, and the garden that she loved. When I showed an interest in the piano, I got piano lessons. And I don't think I would have had piano lessons if she wouldn't have provided those for me. So I got to learn. And once I got to college, she provided my first year in the dorm so that I could go. And once in a while, if she hadn't heard from me, I would receive in an envelope a blank postcard that said, "Dear Grandma" at the top, "Love Tracy" at the bottom with a stamp on it. At my senior recital at SEMO, she was there. When I received a degree from Mizzou, she was there. During my student teaching, I got to live with her. I stayed with her, and she encouraged me all the way through my student teaching. As a reward for my degree at Mizzou, she took me on a trip to Paris and London, and it was amazing. And of course, we saw everything and went everywhere. And I have the best memories of that. I could barely keep up with her, and she was in her 60s. And of course, when we got home, I received an annotated photo album of our trip, complete with the tickets and matchbooks and pictures, and I treasure that. She's always very, very good at keeping things like that. When I got a job teaching, she told me that she was proud of me. And I always wanted her to be proud of me. I so looked up to her. But if I wasn't sure how I was doing, I could just read the annual Christmas letter and see how many sentences I got. The more space you got in the annual Christmas letter, the better you did that year. I fondly remember we had season tickets to the St. Louis Symphony. She loved the symphony, was very active in St. Louis, and we would go on Sunday afternoons. It was perfect. We would go there at 3 o'clock and listen. And I remember we were seeing a piano soloist one time, and during the applause, there was a man behind us, and he was clapping and yelling, "Bravo!" And she turned around and she says, "Who are you, his brother?" She looked at me, she says, "I'm old, I can say anything I want." I have a son, Ryan, and when he was a newborn, again, she let us live with her, and we were talking last night, I think nearly every one of us in the family has lived with Grandma Smith at one point in our life. As we both got older, she eventually moved from her beloved home to the Brentmore, and I was blessed to finally get to be of some help to her and give her back just a little bit of what she had so freely given to me. Usually before we left, we'd watch Wheel of Fortune, and she'd tell me to call her when I got home. And when I left, she was up on the 5th floor. And when I would leave, she would stand out on her balcony to watch for me to go to my car. And we'd see each other, and she would wave we'd both wave and she'd blow a kiss. And so I wave and blow a kiss to my sweet Grandma Smith. I will miss her and I love her. Thank you.
Dr. Christopher Smith, Lieutenant Commander of the United States Navy, former Navy SEAL, is an orthopedic trauma surgeon, professor at 3 universities, and Verna's second-born grandchild. Christopher.
Thank you everyone for coming. I've really enjoyed rekindling old relationships and meeting new family members, and this is really special. Thank you. So this is going to be a little bit like Tracy's, my relationship with my Grandma Smith. I didn't live in the same city as Grandma, so we'd see her on holidays and sometimes in the summertime. But I remember going to Grandma's house as a kid and with my sister Stephanie, and we'd go look at her bell collection on her piano and her rock collection, and we'd play hide and go seek and up the back staircase in her kitchen, and we were certain the 3rd floor was haunted, so we didn't go up there. And then summertime, we'd come back and spend time at her neighbor Jane's pool and have a great time. And she inspired me quite a bit. As Tracy, she attended my every graduation I had. She was there, and it's just looking at her. I thought, she can do it. I can do it. So, really, always enjoyed her Christmas letters and updates in family history. So she was an excellent storyteller, as you all know. So I didn't ask her permission, but I'm going to read a little excerpt from one of her Christmas letters. This one's called The House. We'd been living in our little 2-bedroom house on Dix Avenue since we arrived in St. Louis in 1946 after Al's graduation from Iowa State University in Ames and his employment by Emerson Electric. Our 3 little boys were growing fast and we needed some more room, so we went house hunting. A PTA friend told us about this house on Pineview Court in Overland that had been vacant for some time. "It needs working on," she said. "Okay, we'll do it." And so we did. Wow, did it need work. This 3-story English Tudor-style monstrosity needed paint. The wraparound porch had screens that were hanging in pieces. The front steps, made of wood, were treacherous. The long driveway was made of gravel, which the neighborhood kids loved to throw. But we looked at it through rose-colored glasses, made eye contact, and said, "We can do it." And so we did. The price was right. Our kids loved it, especially the 3rd floor, and immediately said dibs on a bedroom for each one. We had the master bedroom and a bath and dressing room. And oh, the many, many closets. She says this would haunt her 52 years later. The boys changed schools. Phil and Al went to Hope Junior High School and Stuart to Booter Elementary. Every night after work, Al from Emerson and I from Rittner School District, where I was the PR director, and teaching 9th grade English, we had dinner, the boys clearing the dining room table and washed the dishes, and Al and I began the restoring process. We soaked old, dirty, raggedy wallpaper off the walls, replaced molding, tore up cracked linoleum and laid tile, and had beautiful oak floors sanded and varnished. Our tropical fish gasped and died from the dust, alas. We spackled, we painted, had the house painted, and the red tile roof and chimneys inspected, and so on and so on. And of course, we had the driveway paved and blacktop, no more throwing stones. The boys helped when they could. The porch looked great with 2 coats of varnish, as did the ceilings. The front steps, as well as the back porch, were redone with concrete, etc. We began to entertain. Open house for Boy Scout leaders, for my 9th grade English class, for a reunion of my nieces and nephews. And a parting gift, they laid a brick walk from the steps to the driveway. Lots of overnight company. Mom and Dad, Al's mother, Al's nephews and nieces came for extended periods of time. Allison for an entire year with her cat. Barbecues, holidays with all the trimmings, a big birthday for Mom with lots of relatives present. Joyce and Don brought us a big old farm bell from Indiana, which the kids loved to ring. Stuart brought home white mice and brought a little monkey who ravaged the Christmas tree. We finally closed the pocket doors to keep him out, and Al made a cage for him. He also had a baby alligator and found turtles to put up in the window wells outside until he saw them eat a live frog, and back to the woods they went. Music was a big part of our lives. Al and Stuart on the piano, Phil on the trombone and baritone, Stuart on the flute. They wrestled in the huge entry hall, played chess there, threw paper airplanes out the 3rd floor window, caught a bat there and released it, went to Boy Scout outings and baseball practices with her dad. They graduated from high school and went on to Mizzou. She goes on to talk about her career, which we've heard lots of today, and said Al had to retire because of his health. The most poignant memory of all, Al died in our home in 1978, surrounded by his loving and weeping family. So I just want to share a little bit about the house. So as you all know, she was brilliant. She had a passion for life. My daughter, Megan, reminds me of Grandma. With her thirst for knowledge, stick-to-itiveness, and her passion for life. We are all better people for knowing her, and I feel honored and lucky to have been her grandson. As I read this poem, reflect back on your favorite memory of her and how she touched your life. The poem is entitled, "Do Not Stand at My Grave and Weep," by Mary Elizabeth Fry. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I'm the thousand winds that blow. I'm the diamonds in the snow. I'm the sunlight on ripened grain. I'm the gentle autumn rain. As you awake with morning's hush, I am the swept-up flinging rush of quiet birds in circling flight. Do not stand at my grave and cry, I am not there, I did not die. Thank you.
Delivering our eulogy today is Marilyn Mann, a dear friend of Verna's. The two worked closely together for many years. Marilyn Mann is the founder of Oasis, a social outreach to senior citizens that is now active in 50 cities. Marilyn.
You've heard what an extraordinary life Verna had. And I met her in 1972. She worked at CEMRL, as you heard, which was a research and development lab, educational lab that was supposed to change the way we raised children by the materials that we produced and teacher training. And it was housed in a facility that was very imposing. It was the old mental hospital on Arsenal and 59th Street, and it had been turned into this beautiful facility, and it was full of these brilliant, esoteric, and very artsy types. And I went there supposedly to link cultural institutions and the schools. And as a volunteer, they said they didn't have any money for me, but they give me some space and some secretarial help. And I see some people are here who were there in those days. And do any of you remember June Allison? Okay, June Allison was this wonderful movie star. She had a blonde page boy and bangs, and she was always smiling and always upbeat and always warm, and she was never the mean girl. Well, June Allison with glasses walked up to me as I went into the facility, and she said, "Hello, I'm Verna Smith. Can I help you?" And she did for 40 years. Verna was, as you all know, the most extraordinary person. She was the best cheerleader in the whole world. And she did everything for everyone in that facility, above and beyond what she was paid to do. And when I had my epiphany, and with my friend Margie May decided that the demographics of our society said, you've got to do something for people who are aging. We have to have some intellectual stimulation. We have to have some volunteer roles that are meaningful. We have to keep people well. The people at this wonderful laboratory were not at all interested. Those people are going to die. They're not contributing anything. And Marilyn, you're not spending your time here on that. And Verna said, "Oh, Marilyn, what a wonderful idea." Of course, this was Verna's response and to anything that anybody really wanted to do. Well, the lab closed in 1982 because the Reagan administration came in and felt that that money was not the best use. Verna spent a year researching, or rather archiving the materials, and I got the first grant for Oasis, and Verna said, "When I finish this job, I'll come and volunteer for you." And that she did. And as the program grew, Verna continued to be there, as many of us know, 4 days a week. She did editing. She did letter writing. And she also participated in every new idea that we had. When we decided we wanted to train people to be peer counselors, Verna became a peer counselor. And of course, she was the very best because she was the best listener. And when we decided that we wanted to do oral histories, Verna became somebody who could record oral histories. And of course, she was the best because she was the best listener and the most encouraging. And when we wanted to train people to be storytellers, Verna did that. And of course, her best story was how she carried the torch. Now, I wish she'd done a story about carrying the bass drum and twirling her drumsticks. Maybe she's doing that now, I hope. But she was there for us to hug us, to encourage us, to hold our hand during bad times. She brought vegetables from her garden, flowers from her garden, and everything that she had to give. She was the most inspiring person. And indeed, we didn't pay her, but we did pay her way to go to associations and luncheons, and she always represented us. In fact, wherever she went, she'd go up to people who she thought were important and said, "Marilyn Mann said to particularly say hello to you." Some of them I'd never heard of, never saw in my life. But they thought, how nice, Marilyn Mann wants to know me. But she did this for all of us, for everyone. She had this sense of grace and generosity and enthusiasm that was so infectious. And there's one other thing I have to tell you, and that is we had a tradition that every time somebody in Oasis had a birthday, there was a cake and there was a song. And the song was composed by Verna, specially for that person, to some popular tune. I remember one, someone who'd done our Russian project for the Endowment for the Humanities was leaving to move to Atlanta. And so the song began, Anne is leaving, and we're grieving. You get the message. But everyone had a song, and I have a big drawer full of these marvelous songs. And sometimes on a spur of the moment, I'd say, Verna, I just remembered so-and-so has a birthday, and she'd go, oh, but she did it. I think, I didn't know that I was to leave a message, but I think the message that I have and the people who worked with her and who knew her all these years got that it is not what you have in life that's important, but what you do with what you have and what you give to others. And Oasis was all about quality of life as we all age. And Verna was the most incredible role model for that because she was ageless and she was loving and she was giving of her talents, her time, and herself. And none of us who knew her will ever forget her. And I think it was, I don't know, Phil or Al who talked about her going to the pearly gates with St. Peter's. And I have a feeling that St. Peter said, Verna, we have somebody's got a birthday, and she's composing a song to her favorite tune, You Picked a Fine Time to Leave Me, Lucille.